Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this image. Now this picture was captured in one exposure and is pretty much straight out of the camera. The look and atmosphere of the picture can be attributed to the lighting and camera techniques used in its creation. And in this video I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Okay, let's have a look at what I've got set up so far. So on this table here I have the subject and I've placed that on this piece of black perspex. Now to do this sort of photography, black perspex is an ideal base because it will give you a very clean reflection. Okay, so moving a bit further back, at the back here I have some fairy lights. Now these I'm going to use to create the spots of light in the background, which will eventually become the bokeh in the background. Right, so next thing would be the camera. So I'm using this full frame digital SLR, and on the front of this I have an 85mm 1.2 lens. I'm using a lens with a very wide maximum aperture on purpose because this will give the best and biggest bokeh. Okay, so let's just pop that on the tripod, like so. I'll turn the camera on, and the camera is tethered into Capture One software. That way you can see the results as we go along. Okay, so let's just have a look at what settings I have on the camera at the moment. So I have ISO of 100, and I've set the shutter speed to 1/30th of a second, and we've got an aperture of f8. So at those settings, I'm just going to grab an image and see what we get just with the house lights. Okay, so you can see from this image that we're getting some reflections of the house lights in the glass at the bottom here and on the top of the bottle, and some ghosting from the strings of fairy lights on the back, but not a lot else. So I think when we come to actually take the proper picture, as it were, we'll probably need to turn the house lights out. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just turn on the fairy lights at the back here. So with those on, what I'll do now is grab another image and we'll see what sort of background we're getting. Okay, so we're getting the beginnings of a background. We've got some fairly small dots of light going on in this image. Okay, so the next thing would be to add some light. So what I'm going to use is this Profoto D2 studio head in conjunction with this 1 foot by 4 foot softbox. And what I'm going to do with this is just place it at the side here. So we're side lighting the subject. And I'm going to get it relatively close. This distance is possibly ½ a meter, maybe a bit less. And what this will do is produce a highlight which will run along the side of the bottle. Okay, so let's just turn that on. And this is initially set to an arbitrary energy level about halfway through its range. Okay, so with that set, I'll turn the flash trigger on the top of the camera. And you can see from the settings that we have in the software here that I'm still using 1/30th of a second. That should be okay because the flash sync speed for this camera is 1/250th of a second. So anything lower than that will work with the flash. Okay, so with those settings, we'll just grab an image and see what we get. Okay, well that's worked quite well. I've got the highlight running down the length of the bottle here, which is just what I wanted, but it's possibly just in the wrong place. I'd like it a little bit further round the bottle. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is move the softbox further back. So as I do this, it should move the highlight as well. So I'm going to pop it about here. So now it's actually behind the bottle. Yeah, something like that. So you can see that the majority of the softbox is behind the subject here. Same sort of distance as we had before. So let's grab another image and we'll just see what the difference is. Yes, that seems to have worked. That's moved this round the bottle quite a long way. If I go back to the previous image, this is what we had before, and this is what we've got now. So this is more like the sort of thing I want. So now what I want to do is make the highlights in the background appear larger. Now the way to do that is to open up the lens. So at the moment the lens is on f8 as an aperture, so I'm going to do this one stop at a time just to show you what the difference is between each different aperture. So for the next picture I'm going to open up the aperture from f8 to 5.6. There we go, which is one stop. Now to maintain the same exposure on the background, I'm going to need to change the shutter speed. So I'm going to change the shutter speed from 1/30th to 1/60th, like so. Now also I'm going to need to change the amount of energy in the flash. So I'm going to take that down by one stop. So I'll just select that flash. We'll just take one stop off that. And with all those changes, we'll grab another image. Okay, and it's starting to take effect. You can see now that all these highlights in the background are slightly bigger than they were before. I go to where we had before and what we've got now. But there's not really a great deal of change. So yet again, I'm going to change the aperture from 5.6 to an aperture of 4, which is again one stop. So to compensate for that, I'll change the shutter speed to 1/250th of a second, and I'll take off one stop of energy, like that. And you should be able to see that with each decrease in aperture, the size of the highlights is getting bigger. So this is what we had before, and this is what we've got now. So yet again, I'll take another stop off. So from 4 to 2.8, and from 1/125th to 1/250th. And I'll take yet another stop of energy out of the light. Grab that again. So now all the highlights are getting very dominant in the background, which is just what we want. But because I've used a lens which has a very wide maximum aperture, very low f number, I can take it even further. So I'm going to take the aperture from 2.8 right down to 1.4. And this time I'm going to leave the shutter speed at 1/250th of a second. So this will actually make the background slightly brighter. Okay, so we'll just take a stop of energy out of the flash, and we'll grab that again. Now this time there's a profound change in the highlights on the background. So if I go back to where we started, this is at f8, this is 5.6, 4, 2.8, and then there's quite a large change between 2.8 and 1.4. And coupled with that increase in exposure that we added to the background, this has made all of the background highlights really come alive. And also now you can see the reflections in the black perspex and the effects that that makes. And that's why I placed the perspex so far back, so that we actually grab all those reflections and make use of them. Okay, So the next thing I want to do is just add another highlight to the other side of the bottle. So to make that highlight, I'm just going to use a piece of card as a reflector. This is literally an offcut. It's just torn off a longer piece that I had, and I've clamped it to a piece of wood so that it'll stand up on its own. I'm just going to place this at the back here, like that. Now I'm putting it so that it's further behind the bottle than the other light sources, so that the reflection will be closer to the edge of the bottle. So there's a bit of trial and error involved in getting this in exactly the right place. So we'll start about here somewhere and see how we go. I'll place it there. We'll just grab an image. There, you can see the effect that's had. This is the reflection from the card. So this is the previous image without it, and this is with it. So it's not quite in the right place yet. So I'm just going to move it a little bit further back. Maybe there somewhere. We'll try that again. There, that's better. It's moved around the bottle, so it's more of a match for the other side now. So that's what we had before, and that's what we've got now. But we still have all these highlights in the glass and on the bottle itself from the house lights. So the next stage would be to turn the house lights out. There we go. So in order to be able to see a bit better what we're doing, I'm just going to turn the modelling light on that flash head. Like that. There we go. So with the house lights out and the modelling light on, I'll just grab another image. Okay, so it's all starting to come together now. We've lost all those little highlights. If I just go back to the previous one, you can see the effect it was having, and on this one, that's all gone. But also, the contamination that we were getting from the house lights actually lit up the label on the bottle. But now I've turned the house lights out, that's all disappeared. So in order to put it back, what I could do is use a reflector. But you do have to be very careful using reflectors with very shiny objects like this. So for instance, if I put this reflector in here somewhere, like this, and then grab another image, you can see in the image that that has effectively filled in the label on the bottle. But it's also made this highlight in the bottle as well. So what we need to do is find a way that you can fill in the label and yet not put too much of a highlight on the bottle. And the way to do that is just make your reflector very much bigger. There we go. So I'll just pop this in here. So this is a 4 foot by 4 foot reflector, and I'm using that at quite a long distance away from the bottle, which will make the effect very subtle. So let's just grab that as a test and see what it looks like. Okay, well at first sight it doesn't look like it's actually done anything at all, but if I just flick back to the one without the reflector in, which is this one, you can see that it is adding a very small amount to the label. So we just need to make it a bit closer. So what I'm going to do is just move it a little bit closer in. That. It's a fairly subtle change. There we are, that's better. That's filled in the label on the bottle quite nicely without affecting too much of the bottle. We've got a little highlight in there, but nothing too substantial. If I go back to the one with no reflector in, that is what we got. That is what we got with the card. Now that is what we've got with the reflector in its present position, which I think is the best of the lot. Okay, so with that captured, it's probably time just to turn the lights back on and go into Photoshop and do the bare minimum of post-production. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and the first thing I'm going to do is just duplicate this image. So I'm just going to go onto the layer here, just right click that, ask for a duplicate layer, but I don't want it in the same document. I want a new document. So I'll just pick a name, we'll call that Bokeh, and just click on OK. Good. So as you can see, that's made a new file at the top here, so I'm not editing the camera original, I'm editing this new file. So the first thing I'd like to do, just do a global adjustment to the levels in the image. So I'm just going to go up to Image here, go to Adjustments, come along to Levels, and I'm going to set a new black point, because I want to just make sure that this background is actually black. So I'll just select the black point icon and move on to the image area, and I'll just click that. And as you can see from the numbers at the top here, as I now move around, you can see the difference between what it was and what it is now. It was very low before, but now it's an accurate black point. So that's good. Next thing I want to do is just change the midtones ever so slightly. I just want to increase them a little bit, just to bring the label a bit further into life. So somewhere around there. So if I just turn the preview on and off, you can see the difference that has made. That's what we had before, and that's what we've got now. Click on OK. Right, so I think the next stage would be just to clean up the edges. So I'm literally just going to add another layer and paint on that layer in black. So making sure that we have black selected as the foreground colour. Find a paintbrush, make it quite large. Like that, very soft. We'll just paint down the sides, making sure that the opacity is set to 100%, like so. There we are. Good. And finally, I'll just go for a crop. This is going to be destined for video, so I'm going to pick a ratio of 16:9. I'm just going to move the image further in so that it's in the right sort of place, something like that. I might just bring these handles out slightly, like so. And I'll also just make sure that the bottle is straight. So the easiest way to do that is to use the straighten command. Just draw a line from the top of the bottle to the bottom, like so. There we are. So it's a very subtle change, but a little change nonetheless. And I think I might just take that over to one side ever so slightly as well. Something like that. Okay, so I'll click on Execute, like so. And we now have this band at the side here, which isn't filled in. But all I need to do there is just reselect the paintbrush, make sure I'm on that new layer, and we'll just paint that on, like so. And there we have it. So this shows just what you can do with some point light sources and a very wide aperture. You do need a very wide aperture to make this work. You can do it with a 2.8 lens, but the bokeh itself will end up being much smaller. As for lighting the bottle itself, that is relatively straightforward. It just needs a little bit of care to get the highlights in the right place and of the correct density. But all in all, I think that's worked very well. Okay, well I hope you liked seeing how I made that image, and if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other pictures as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Oh, and click the like button. Thank you very much for watching.